So this week I was trying to figure out how to do my Division review. I know that sounds ridiculous when the game has been out since the start of March. My reason for waiting so long is that I wanted to wait and see what the game would be like after a good amount of time before delivering my opinion. This has become ever more important in recent years due to the way games are being delivered, fixed, patched, supported and so on. Battlefield's CTE program is a perfect example of a long-term delivery system, which meant the final incarnation of the game would receive an arguably very different review to its initial release. Still, you can't wait years to deliver a review. It needs to happen in the first week or weeks, right? So as to best inform the viewer. Traditionally, I would agree this is the concept of a review, yet I find myself really questioning what is the point of reviews? Or maybe it's just the term review that doesn't sit very well with me. I think that something like Total Biscuit, with his WTF series, really does this the best, where essentially what you're doing is kind of looking at what the game is there from a starting point. You know, he'll play the game some, he'll look at it in this kind of first look, first view, first overview style, and then speculate or suggest or describe and break down the elements therein. But it's not a review necessarily. It's not necessarily like, I have hardcore grinded through the entire game and then this is what I think of it. It's more kind of like, here's what it is, here's what I think it's worth at this point. Should you consider getting on board yourself? A game review, though, usually has to be delivered also very soon after release from an editorial point of view to maximise attention to that media. Eyes will be on that content most often, obviously, around release, so you obviously then want to get your reviews out as soon as possible, if not even on the day of release. But how can this give an accurate review of the game? What do we mean by review? I think that's truly the crux of the matter for me. Review suggests something comprehensive, but how can rushing through a game be comprehensive? It paints only then a snapshot of what you could actually expect to experience from the game, and that's without all the other baggage that can come with the review. Game producers and devs generally will have their content ready to go before release. They will often ship out review copies to old school media like Polygon, Edge, Kotaku, websites, magazines, increasingly now more than ever to new media like YouTubers and streamers. That's been going on for a while. The problem is that game producers have become acutely aware of how strongly YouTubers and streamers will dissect their game at release, often far more aggressively and in detail than any old school media would have. And by doing this far more than traditional media outlets, who always had a more symbiotic relationship than new media, what we mean by this is, the classic, you want a copy of our game for your review, then you better not be too harsh in your critique, or maybe off the record you won't receive one next time around. This has been discussed many times before and still happens. In fact, it happened fairly recently. I remember I can't remember what the specific case was, but it was in Kotaku and they couldn't get a review copy for a game, and it was something to do along the lines that something had previously been said quite negatively or something along these lines, and so they didn't get a review copy and they were not too pleased about this. So, it happens. Let's be clear though, that would be never said in writing. It's all going to be off the table. It's the unwritten rules. Everyone knows this, including gamers, and it's why people have picked up on how AAA games reviewed by major media rarely score below a 7. Still, incidentally, I don't think numerical scores are a good way to review something anyway. Another aspect to consider is the skill of the person playing that review, and this is something which never really seems to come into consideration, but it's pretty important. I remember hilariously reading a review on an old school media site, I won't say which one, about the game Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, where the guy who was reviewing it made repeated complaints about how slow it was to move around the game. The next day an amendment was added stating the devs had contacted them to say that he hadn't realised one of the controls allowed you to move faster. From what I've seen also personally at events, games journalists, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, alright, but just from my own personal experiences, games journalist skills are a patchwork at best. I have never claimed to be myself especially skilled, but honestly, seeing some journalists play games, you have to wonder how often they play, and it must be a lot, so I don't know what to make of that. Some of them I saw, trouble switching between a controller and a mouse and a keyboard. Come on, guys, that's pretty basic stuff. So these things are actually pretty critical. Alien Isolation was a huge example of questionable review player skills. So with Alien Isolation, I attended events pre-release, which I posted on YouTube. Me and other producers knew, from playing and working and speaking to the devs, that this game was brutally hard, and we loved it. Gamers, I think there's a bit of a renaissance of gamers wanting seriously hard games. Just look at, Dark Souls. When the reviews came out anyway for Alien Isolation, it was clear that gamers loved the difficulty, but official reviews, if you like, were more, not critical, but less enthusiastic of it. In fact, IGN, as I was saying before, rarely scoring less than a 7, scored it 5.9 and declared it mediocre due to dying a lot, becoming tiring later in the game. Essentially, the game was too hard for the reviewer, and they didn't like it because of this. Now, if you watch my playthrough of the game, you would see that I died plenty early on, but the challenge was overcoming that, and in the latter half of the game, I got the rhythm down. You also have more tools at your disposal later on in the game, so why you would be dying loads later on in the game actually really makes no sense. So my review of that game, fucking loved it. So factoring in how well someone actually can cope with the game in front of them, unfortunately, is a factor in reviews, and yet another reason to take them with more than a pinch of salt, especially from major media sites where you have little evidence of how well that person actually played. They literally have got a written review there, and that's all you have to judge it by. At least with a YouTuber, you have a vague idea of that person's abilities, and then you can gauge your opinion of their opinion accordingly. Let's come back to biases though, and the point is that some people will always feel that if they do not offer a positive review, even when pointing out some issues, they will harm a future relationship. This could apply to anyone, but especially of any YouTubers or streamers who are just starting out. They're going to be especially worried about that kind of thing. There is no doubt a tendency to try and please people who support you. I like to think that I have adjusted my own content style as I have gone along, but overall I feel I've always stayed true to my principles, even though I've kind of, ummed and ahed about saying certain things and here and there. Sometimes you think, do you want to be that harsh? Do you need to be that harsh? But I've always stayed true to the principles of my channel, which is, saying exactly what I think and, pointing out major deficiencies in games and, issues that other people maybe don't want to speak about. And these things often to the detriment of my own channel, as some fellow producers regularly remind me of. So let's not pretend, though, as well, that feeling a slight positive bias is some evil thing, or that X-producer is automatically a corrupt shill. It's a natural thing to want to protect your own interests. And, be honest, right? It's hard. It's hard to stand there and say, I'm going to review this brutally and objectively. Those of you who are sitting there listening to this thinking that's bullshit, Luton, I would definitely say what I think 100% down the line all the time. Really, would you? Really? Well, try it. Go and make a YouTube channel and try and do that, okay? Because you will definitely at some point have some kind of relationship with someone and you think to yourself, do I want to go just that way a little bit more, or do I not? That's the thing that will affect people's thinking. And I've had conversations with many people about these kind of things. All right, it's something which happens. It doesn't just happen in gaming; it happens in a lot of things, and it's a human aspect. All right, it's a human aspect. You can't get away from it. And so, making the conscious choice to be solidly objective is difficult, and it's important. And also, let's not pretend, okay, massive YouTube names like Total Biscuit, Angry Joe, they can do this because they know they can say whatever they want to, and it will have actually next to no impact on them. Whereas, as I say, a smaller YouTuber, somebody who's starting out, that's going to be a different, kettle of fish completely. For me, YouTube is not my full-time job, so I don't care greatly if someone decides not to work with me after I put out content. That actually just confirms to me that there's someone I wouldn't want to work with or, have to speak about their content. Still, with all of that said, even a small bias is bad enough because you're not giving a true review. But how can you know if somebody is biased? Well, the answer is you can't. You just have to decide that for yourself and judge based on their integrity and general approach to the content that they provide. I think more often than not, you can generally tell this just by the style of content or the style of writing the person puts together. I've made no secret of the fact that I work often with developers. This is totally normal for producers and journalists. By working with developers, you can get more insight and often access to things early to help better understand or showcase the titles that I play and things that are upcoming. Do I allow this to affect the way I review or produce my content? No. I have spoken on this recently as well when it came to talking about sponsored content. In fact, sometimes I think my blunt opinions can actually negatively affect how some of my content is received, but that's just how I make my content. You might think that those issues are the biggest problem with reviews that we've spoken about already. If you can't be honest, then what's the point? Well, actually, in my opinion, they're not the biggest issue. Why? Well, mainly because the way games are produced and consumed has changed, but the way games are reviewed doesn't seem to have changed. Consequently, the relevance of a standalone title review has really diminished to the point I would say that they're not something you should use to judge making a purchase of that game on at all. This might sound a bit of a pill to swallow, but stay with me. I feel like many of you have probably also come to this conclusion already yourselves. You see, the thing is that once upon a time, games did not have the ability to be continually patched to update them, nor did they have a massive community to prop up a game which would probably have become tedious long ago were it not for the creativity or passion of those playing it. Now, as people, we review everything, be it from your lunch you had yesterday to a blockbuster movie. The thing is, nearly everything we consume is a single event or an item. It's something that once you have, you will either form an immediate opinion on or now know how it performs, and that's the end of it. Technology is a little different in that you might want to know over time will it perform less efficiently and so on, things like that. But games, to my mind, are totally separate from most other things that we as people review. Games are more liquid in how they can be changed and developed, but are also literally subject to forces beyond the physical game's control. This is where we come back to The Division. So when I originally heard about The Division, I wasn't especially interested. Apocalypse, third-person thing, whatever. Later at EGX I got a chance to check it out. Pleasantly surprised, reminded me of Ghost Recon, but I didn't really see it was anything so special. Closed beta. Wow, suddenly I am so excited for this game. The movement, the co-op, the look and feel, the progression, the UI, this game is going to be amazing, and I bloody love it. Run up to release, thinking about possibilities of the game, can't wait, bit of speculation, bit of hype, even against my own judgment decided to splash out on the season pass. I know. This was just like my confidence after the beta. I was like, yeah, it's a bit cheaper with the season pass, let's get it. It's like proving myself right, Anyway, at release, can't stop playing it. I love it. I love everything about it. It feels great. I want to level up more and more and more. Having a great time. Release +1. Missions starting to feel a bit repetitive, but wow, leveling up so fast. I seem to have skipped whole areas of the map. Why am I collecting all this gear when my gun from 10 levels ago still outperforms them? Release +1 week. Shit, my friends have leveled so fast they now vastly outclass me, and missions are either super hard or I have no involvement when I do it with them. Release +2 weeks. Starting to get bored. All the missions are the same. I'm hearing a lot of bad things about the Dark Zone, and why would I even go in there when I can do all the PvE without needing to go in there? Release plus more time. Lost interest in the game. I'm now just keeping half an ear on what a mess the game is with exploitation, hacking, glitching. Friends are telling me about the grinding for endgame, which is kind of irrelevant in the larger scheme of things. And that's about where I am with it. Now, I plan to do a more thorough analysis, but basically the point is, the way I would have felt about the game in the first week, even had I hardcore through the PvE, bears little resemblance to how I felt at a month's time. I also wouldn't have been able to predict how hacking and exploits would become so rampant that it makes you feel that anything you could accomplish is largely pointless. And this is why full reviews of a game in the first week are worthless. You can't know how that game's community is going to change in 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. Many people buy a game as an investment of time. They want to play more than just the base game. They want an online multiplayer experience, and they want the developer to support that proficiently. so knowing how the campaign and first week of multiplayer plays out is about as helpful as interviewing a new housemate for your flat share. They will likely say all the right things, and it's only a month later, when they crash home drunk at 4 AM and leave a bike parked in your living room, you start to realise that you might have misjudged things somewhere. On the flip side, you might look at a game which had pretty atrocious reviews at release, but actually turned out to be a pretty damn good game. SimCity, good example. When the game came out, people were so excited, but traffic queue bugs, loss of whole saves, and online only really killed people's enthusiasm. But fast forward a month or two, and things have been ironed out. The damage was done though, people still had the mentality that the game was broken. But I remember live streaming the game and people were asking if this game is playable now. I was like, yes, for weeks, it's fine, you can play, it's a great game, it's really enjoyable. So it swings both ways. A game may have a positive launch but descend into twattish, hacking pointlessness that makes you want to break your fingers, or it may have a glitchy, broken first few weeks but then be ironed out into something really enjoyable that you're going to play for hundreds of hours. So what should we do instead? Well, my plan is this. We still want to hear opinions about those initial game impressions, yet rushing to give a full review seems a lot of work, but for very little solid perspective. I'm not suggesting to play a game for an hour and then say, right, time to make a video, but similarly, grinding through just to say you have seems equally unnecessary. Also, not everybody wants to hear the full ins and outs of a game, so early on. They want to experience it for themselves, so there's an added benefit there as well. Now, okay, as a gamer for over 25 years now, I like to think I have built up a pretty reasonable wealth of knowledge to speculate on, if I think a game is going to be worth it or not. To do this, you're going to look at a developer's historical releases, the game's concept, its subsequent execution, and possible future weaknesses in the design there. So I plan to put out first looks or overviews, as I've already done for games for the last couple of years. That's going to be for the first week or so of the release. These are not going to be reviews, it would simply be my thoughts about the game in the first week stage as a normal player, not playing hardcore to finish it up ASAP, and if I felt it was worth throwing some money at, as well as the risk chance of it failing, how I kind of felt it was going. You can take my word for it or not, it's up to you. If I feel it's necessary later, say a month, I would put forward not a review, but a breakdown of the current state of the game, and if it was living up to expectation, and generally if it delivered value. Alternately, should a game crash and burn, e.g. Battlefield Hardline, I would look at it in a new series called Post-Mortems. These overviews would dissect what the Christ went wrong, and if it was obvious or could have been prevented. Thanks to Darth Vader for that idea on Twitter today. So reviews of games generally seem to be somebody saying, hey, here is what I think of this product in its entirety and my opinion on if you should purchase it. As I highlighted, games change so fast and have so many changeable factors to their failure or success, this kind of static opinion means very little in the context of how debilitating changes further along can affect that experience. So what I'm saying is maybe we need to rethink how we handle assessing games as they release. That's my conclusion anyway. I will say that this does primarily apply to big releases, not so much things like indie games. You might be thinking though, well, what's the difference between a standard review and just like a first week overview? Well, the difference is that usually a review will be somebody hardcoring through a game in order to try and give that overall opinion in the first week. So they've really got to, get it all together, get it out. The point I'm making is that, for one thing, playing through a game fast to try and give an opinion might not really be conducive to actually giving a fair or actually accurate representation of that game. Also, with the way so many big releases seem to almost have a phased release of mini updates, now wouldn't it make sense to stagger analysis of the game, especially in that first month where they're kind of really addressing issues or even maybe, making some tweaks and changes still? Then, later put together a more comprehensive overview. To my mind, that makes much more sense. It won't help you much to know if you should make a purchase, but then for the reasons I've outlined, neither will a standard review. And then on top of that, most games this applies to will be primarily online or have a huge multiplayer element, so reviewing early won't really mean very much because until time passes, you won't be able to offer any meaningful opinion beyond literally what you can see, unless it has some major game-breaking issues there. especially if you factor in my favourite grievance, season passes, and my regularly repeated issue of them being sold without knowing if there will be any community existing to support them when they're finally released. Add to this the fact that usually any major issues, or in the case of the Division, game-breaking exploits don't appear until people have had time to find and then exploit them. None of these things can be included in the first week review, and these are some of the most important things that you want to know. Anyway, all of that is all well and good, but what does it mean? Should we just stop buying games until a month after release? No, obviously not, that would be stupid. All I'm saying is that, as with most of my discussion pieces, you need to just keep this stuff in mind. Think about past experiences and use that knowledge to build your opinion. Use people like me to help you build your opinion, but ultimately make your own choice, and most importantly, keep yourself grounded. Don't watch one review from someone who seems super excited and everything's great and it's all the best, and then let that hype rub off onto you. Keep a clear head to make the best purchases possible. Remember, YouTubers, it's in their interest that people view and watch, and generally people like channels which are positive and exciting and hyped up. You know, people like that kind of crap, but it doesn't mean that that kind of stuff is necessarily going to be the most informative and most rounded opinion for you to make a decision off of. No one is responsible for what you purchase other than yourself. So if you feel unsure of how a game may play out, then wait. If you've been burned before, learn from that. I have certainly been caught off guard by The Division. It's one of the most up and down experiences I've had in recent times. I really thought this was going to be a different affair and we were set for something solid. I remember speaking to guys in my clan and saying, this is it. This is going to be the one where we get that tight squad play. This is what it's going to be all about. My God, how wrong I was. And I happily hold my hands up saying that. I will speak more on The Division soon, but wow, I had really high hopes and it's crushed them all. You know, we live in a time now where things are uncertain, and a game's online capability is both a blessing and a curse. The online nature of games means we have the ability to patch out issues, develop a game over time, and join friends across the world. At the same time, it means we see others that are hell-bent on ruining fun and breaking entire games on a scale that we've never seen before. Creating any subjective opinion in the hope you'll provide a useful perspective for others is no easy task. For me, the key to that is keeping your feet on the ground and remaining objective. Thinking what it is you're trying to achieve, not just how you can make the most views. Not being caught by the demon that is hype, and most importantly, not being just critical of the game you're covering, but critical also of yourself. I've never understood why people so often refuse to admit when they are wrong or have made a mistake. Learning from your own errors is important in becoming a better person and more adept at whatever it is you're doing. In overviewing a game, being able to say to your viewers, whatever I tell you, I say with complete conviction and forthright opinion, whether it's positive, negative, or even admitting I misjudged something. That's very important to me. This is Luton. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this discussion and the way I approach games as a producer, please consider subscribing here, and also my second channel, Looting Gaming, which focuses on a lot of games which are not so militaristic, tactical, or just maybe seriousness as well there. Links to all my media are down in the notes, Twitter, Twitch, etc. Check it out. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.